Union goons and gentlemen. There's more to the liberal and union push for the Employee Free Choice Act than meets the eye. Other than just generally making it easier for unions to get more union dues, more members, there's a socialist appeal to it. They want nationalized health care, speaking of the union goons, so they can dump their liabilities on the taxpayer and not be held accountable for their mismanagement of gold-plated health care plans and pensions. Many union goon pension funds are seriously underfunded. They're in the red. The devil is in the details, as they say, and we'll also deal with the oft-repeated phrase, "It's Bush's fault," because liberals will inevitably use that, but it doesn't work in this case. We'll also expose the fact that union goon managers and executives are usually taken better care of than the rank-and-file peasants. Before we get to the big picture, let's look at what's happening concerning public employees in the People's Republic of San Francisco. BART is attempting, the Bay Area Rapid Transit, is attempting to close a $250 million deficit over the next 4 years, but have been stymied by union demands for a 3% wage increase, despite the fact that the union on averages $114,000 a year in wages and benefits. As BART spokesman Linton Johnson said, this is not a good time to be asking for a raise. Furthermore, Johnson pointed out that this is our first time that we've asked the unions to dig into their pockets, and that the writers have already dug into their pockets. So it's a good idea. Have the writers, have the people who actually use it pay for it. That's a novel idea. Most BART workers who retire at age 55 with 30 years of service will collect an annual pension equal to 60% of top salary. That doesn't include Social Security they'll get. Most who retire at age 63 with 40 years of service can collect 97% of top salary. Meanwhile, BART workers don't contribute a dime to their pensions. You get that? BART workers don't contribute a dime to their pensions. I'm contributing to mine. I'm not using taxpayer funds to do it either. The district pays the employer's share, 10% of salary, to the pension plan, and it picks up the portion that's typically paid by the employee, in this case about 7% of salary, which to the higher end workers this costs quite a bit. Then there's more. BART employees and retirees choose from about 5 different health plans. The cost to the employee or retiree is $82 a month, no matter how many family members are covered or which plan is selected. Well, that's different in the private sector. If you add a spouse or a child, it goes up, obviously. BART pays the rest of the premium, costing the district as much as $1,868 a month. It's a deal generally unmatched by private sector employers because they're using their own money. With these kinds of benefits, it's hard to imagine why anyone would go on strike, yet the unions seem to find an excuse for it. Never mind the fact that not getting a 3% raise to pad that $114,000 income outweighs the burden and inconvenience of a strike for the more than 350,000 Bay Area residents who utilize BART. In fact, public employees in the train wreck known as California receive wonderful benefits, all courtesy of the taxpayer. I guess when you're using someone else's money, the sky's the limit. If you're not working for the California state government, you should. And here's more. As recently as 2000, the AFL-CIO's 8.5 million members had a 45 million surplus. That's in 2000, 45 million surplus. By June of last year, it had 90.6 million in liabilities, or 2.3 million more than its 88.3 million in assets. As for the SEIU, as recently as 2002, total SEIU liabilities were about 8 million. According to its 2008 disclosure form, the union owed more than 156 million, a 30% increase over the 120 million it owed in 2007. Its liabilities now equal more than 80% of its 189 million in assets. Almost half of the nation's 20 largest unions have pension funds that federal law classifies as endangered or in critical condition due to being underfunded. An examiner review of federal actuarial reports shows the average union pension has resources to cover only 62% of what is owed to participants. You get that? The average union pension fund has resources to cover only 62% of what is owed to participants, according to the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation. Less than 1 in every 160 workers is covered by a union pension with required assets. And here's some more interesting information contrasting the pension fund for rank and file members and the executives. In April, the SEIU National Industry Pension Fund, which covers some 101,000 rank and file members, announced that its pension has been put into what the feds call critical status or red zone. In other words, it lacks the cash to pay promised benefits and may have to cut them. As of 2007, the last year for which it reported results to the government, the fund had 74.4% of the assets needed to pay its benefits. 13 of the bigger plans operated for the Teamsters have together a mere 59.3% of reserves necessary to cover obligations. Only 59.3%. Or consider that 26 pension funds at the Food Workers Union, the UFCW, are at 58.7%. 7 locals at the United Brotherhood of Carpenters fare better at 67%. As a rule of thumb, the government considers a fund to be endangered at below 80% and in critical status below 65%, and requires them to come up with a plan to get off probation within a decade. You don't hear labor leaders touting this kind of performance in their organizing riffs, and not many workers are patient enough to review the Form 5500 filings submitted to the IRS and Department of Labor that track these retirement savings. But the data show a steady decline in recent years that can't be explained merely by the stock market. Here comes it's Bush's fault that they'll resort to because, well, they like short arguments and they don't want to put work into it. For example, United Here's National Retirement Fund stood at 115% in 1998 and dropped to 83.4% by 2007, well before the crash. The SEIU fund that was put into a red zone in April was at 103.4% as recently as 1998. On average, the asset to liability ration at so-called multi-employer plans, which union funds make up the bulk of, stood at 66% in 2006, according to the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation. By contrast, single employer plans, basically most company-provided pensions, were funded at 96%, so you can see a big gap there. An even bigger mystery is that the unions do a far better job with funds created for their officers' employees than for mere workers. The SEIU affiliates, officers, and employees' pension plan, which covers the staff and bosses at its locals, was funded as of 2007 at 102.2%. The plan for the folks at SEIU International Headquarters, this is the peasantry, was funded at 84.8%. So it's sliding quite a bit. Big gap there. Union officer benefits are also far more generous than anything dues-paying workers enjoy. Consider again the SEIU, probably the country's most powerful union. Their officers' employees get a nearly 3% cost of living increase, but SEIU members get none. Officers qualify for an early pension at 50 or after more than 30 years of service, but workers can't retire early with a pension. Officers qualify for disability retirement after a year's service, but workers need 10 years. In the land of union retirement, some workers are more equal than others. So you can see why they want the Employee Free Choice Act, complete with card check, binding arbitration. They're trying to shove through a revised version right now that still has binding arbitration in it, in which the unions during this arbitration will demand ridiculous amounts, and then the arbiter will meet them in the middle with what the management wants, what the business wants, and then the unions will get most of it there. So you can see why they want the Employee Free Choice Act, because they're mismanaging their funds. Management gets a lot better benefits than the peasantry, and most of these pension funds are in deep trouble. So you can see why they want to dump everything on the taxpayer. So tell your senators and congressmen no to the revised version of the Employee Free Choice Act with binding arbitration. Tell them to scuttle it. Let's pass the National Right to Work Act.